Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Q&A, the show. I take your questions from YouTube, Twitter, and generally from around the internet and answer them here in video format. A lot of questions about the Browns game and how it went down and some of the things that we might have learned or might not have learned or, overreactions, underreactions, whatever it is. A lot of questions this week for this Q&A. So we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to start with a question from Box who says, how do you think 2-minute drills need to be addressed? This is the weird thing about the 2-minute drill because it isn't 2-minute drills, right? They've had two real 2-minute drills at the end of games, and the play calling was fine in the one in Kansas City. Baker just threw an interception, partly because he got tripped up, but he threw an interception. Like, Baker ruined that 2-minute drill essentially by throwing an interception, whether you think it was kind of forced or not. That's what happened in that one. So that's not one you could chalk up on Kevin Stefanski. They ran some excellent 2-minute drills in the Houston game and in the Chicago game. So, no, I don't think 2-minute drills is the problem. I don't think it's, Kevin Stefanski can't call a 2-minute drill all of a sudden. This team has had excellent 2-minute drills last year and this year. What's changed between last year in this year? That's the logical question we need to ask ourselves, right? Baker, he's fine. He's still playing at the level relatively that he was last year, right? The wide receivers are better. You've added Odell, so it's not that. The coaching staff is obviously the same. The offense is obviously the same. But what was different in that last final 2-minute drill than was for any other 2-minute drill in the season? The answer to that question, I feel like, is rather obvious, but it's one that I have rarely heard be discussed in the conversation of when it comes to play calling and when it comes to how the team performed, and that was team was out their starting tackles, right? The O-line was not at full strength. And I think that, and I think even Kevin Stefanski admitted to it, that more than anything affected the play calling on top of in key situations, right? On some key fourth and longs or third and longs during the season so far, offensive line, the tackle play just hasn't held up, and it's caused the Browns to not get those opportunities. And I've heard it thrown around a lot. Kevin doesn't trust Baker. Kevin doesn't trust his wide receivers. I don't know if that's true, but what I do know and what I do feel like is 100% true is right now Kevin Stefanski does not trust his offensive line play for some rather good reasons, right? Blake Hance and James Hudson out there, not necessarily going to inspire a ton of confidence just because they're not your regular starters. So I'm thinking that once the offensive line gets back to full strength and you get a healthy Jedrick Wills and you get Jack Conklin back healthy, that, you're going to see the things open up like it did last year. And I think that's really the difference, right? I don't think his faith in some of these players has dramatically dropped from a level that's below where it was last year. I think his faith in the offensive line because of injuries has dropped, which has led to some horrid play calling because he's afraid that, Baker's going to get sacked without any timeouts in a 2-minute drill. So he doesn't want to hold on to the football. Fortunately and unfortunately, the Chargers really weren't trying to blitz you at the end of that game, so you could have gotten away with holding the ball a little bit longer. It's a chess game. Kevin Stefanski lost that chess game, but I don't think this means that we need to make a bunch of overhauls and change a bunch of things. It's just a learning experience. The next question comes from Fark, who says, based on overall performances this week, do you see us realistically being able to keep up with Arizona? I'm scared to death of piling injuries, continued lapses of communication in our secondary. This will make it another shootout scenario that could result in a similar fashion. It could very well be a shootout scenario. It could very well be another shootout. And, maybe this time you win it, right? Like that's the scenario you find yourself in. Arizona and the Chargers are two of the best offenses, at least this time. They're the road team coming from across the country to play at a hostile environment versus, the Browns going 3 hours or 4 hours across the country via plane to play LA. So, yeah, it might be a shootout. Guess what? In the NFL, if you're going to be a contending team, You got to be able to survive a shootout. So, this ain't something you could just avoid. It's going to happen. Every single team that contends in the NFL has to play in some form of a shootout. And, in the AFC where there's so many high-powered offenses, and then you have a schedule where you're playing the select high-powered offenses in the NFC, you're just going to see a lot, and I mean a lot, of shootouts at this point, and it's up to the Browns to keep up with it, and they're more than capable. Like, in any shootout scenario, the Browns shouldn't feel like they're outmatched. They are more than capable of keeping up. They put up 42 points, and they didn't even throw the ball past like 30 yards more than like 3 times in that game. So they're more than capable of putting up as many points as they need to. They just need to execute at that level. The issue isn't that you can't win a shootout. The issue is that you haven't executed at the level you need to win a shootout, which, is unfortunate, but it's something that's not a big deal. Next question comes from Sam Franklin, who says, Q, is there an organizational course at the end of this play calling? I thought we escaped it last year when we won close games, but here it is again. You touched on the last video. Can you expand on the ineffective prevent offense comparing last year to this year? I think a lot of the biggest differences between the play calling of last year and this year has to do with the lack of faith right now in the offensive line. I think that's the biggest thing. 2, if you look at it from the first half of last year, in the first half of this year, in the first half of Kevin Stefanski's first year as offensive coordinator in Minnesota, this is nothing new. Doesn't make it any less frustrating. Now, what I meant by prevent offense is it seems like we have a tendency when the Browns get up by a lead, right, 2 scores most of the time, to just completely stop doing what got you to the dance when it comes to that blowout, right, and just go strictly to only the run game. That's the frustrating part. It's not that you're running the ball more than you're passing the ball. It's not that you're not running the same exact plays. It's that the balance gets completely thrown off into one direction, and then you become predictable. And what happens often from my experience in just watching this is when you start to go run first down, run second down, what happens most of the time at the end of games when you're doing that with the lead is that teams key up on that, and you end up with 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7. Sometimes you get a penalty, 3rd and 14, right? And then after not throwing it for 2 straight plays, you're asking Baker to come out cold and make a 3rd and 14. Now, a lot of times Baker is good enough to get that. He did that a lot last year. He doesn't get any credit for it, but he did that a lot last year. But it's not a good way to run the offense, especially late in games. I understand why Kevin does it, right? Kevin does things for a reason. You run the ball, you'll run more clock out. Even if you go 3 and out, if you go 3 and out when you run the ball, you're probably going to take a minute or 2 off the clock, versus if you go 3 and out and throw the ball, you're not going to take any time off the clock. I understand the reasoning behind why he does it. It's one of those things that if you look at it outside of the human aspect of football, seems smart, but when you do it in practice, has obvious consequences, and this is one of them. You become vanilla. You become stale. It has an effect on the offense, and then all of a sudden, guys who were hot earlier in the game get cold because you took them out of doing what they want to do, right? It's that ideal, right? I compare things to basketball a lot because I feel like basketball is a great sport for analogies, but it's like if a team is having a lot of success pushing the ball and going on a fast break, and they get a 25-point lead, and all of a sudden they're holding the ball and running really slow offense, and then what happens? The offense stagnates. Guys get cold. People aren't hot. Now more guys are missing shots. All of a sudden the other team gets on a run, and now all of a sudden you're in a close ball game. That's prevent offense. When you're so worried about the clock, when you're so worried about what the other team is doing or what the other team is going to do in your play calling, that you allow them to get back in the game because you have fallen away from what you were doing to get yourself that lead. You have went away from what was working, what was hot, to what is going to chew the most clock, and that's not really a great way to win. It's an analytical way of thinking. It's not one of those things that I think works well in practice. So that's what I mean by prevent offense. The next question comes from Splack, who says, do you think the numerous blown coverages this week can be attributed to newish players still learning, or were there schematic holes that got exploited by a better coach? No, they're not schematic holes, man. Those weren't schematic holes. You know a schematic hole when you see one. What was happening there was just pure miscommunication, just absolute 1,000% pure miscommunication for obvious reasons. And you named it in the question, right? They had new players, guys coming in and out. Nobody got on the same page. And the Chargers are relentless. They're going to push the ball up the field, up the field, up the field all the time. And it's the old adage, right? You throw stuff on the wall, something's going to stick eventually. And that's what happened, right? They took enough shots down the field that when they did have those breakdowns, they were able to execute on them, because that's the kind of mindset that they have there with the Chargers, where they're just always going to go and try to attack downfield. They're not going to think about the check down. They're not going to think about the 5-yard under. They're going to attack downfield. And when you do that, sometimes you get real lucky and get to benefit from a lot of broken coverages because of miscommunication. So that's how the Chargers play, and that's how they executed that. And that's mostly on the Browns for just not having their communication together. Next question comes from Rockstar Slush, who says, how can Kevin change to be more aggressive in the fourth quarter? He seems to go limp in the fourth quarter damn near every game since he has gotten to Cleveland. And you see the Vikings are kind of like that too. Did he bring that mindset from Minnesota to Cleveland? I want to remind everybody that while I do have criticisms of Kevin Stefanski, that also Kevin's only in his second year as a head coach, third year as a play caller. He has room to grow. He can develop, right? The Bill Belichick that was in Cleveland in 94, in 93 to 95, or however long he was here, not the Bill Belichick that's in New England, right? He had to develop. He had to grow. He wasn't a finished product. So the ideal that Kevin just is what he is right now is ridiculous. He, just like any other young player in his second or third year, has the ability to grow. This is how coaches learn, from these kind of situations. Andy Reid is somebody who is notorious for kind of running prevent offense, right? And it took him until he got to the Kansas City Chiefs and got Patrick Mahomes to break out of that. These are things that coaches evolve from. Hopefully it doesn't take Kevin 2 jobs in 20 years to learn that, but these are things that coaches learn from because of games like this. So this is a learning experience, and learning experiences are not exclusive to the players. They are also there for the coaches and for the team that has a young coaching staff relatively. This is a learning experience for the coaches. The next question comes from Wesley, who says, hey, Q, do you think the problem with the offense is more play calling, not allowing Baker to stay hot when he gets hot, or Baker reads, not seeing Odell open or not trusting him to catch it? It's a combination of both, right? I'm not going to let Baker completely off the hook. There are some times where he doesn't make the right decision, and sometimes that decision involves him not seeing Odell. But also, the play calling has not been what it is. And sometimes the play calling hasn't been what it is because the offensive line hasn't been holding up to what it needs to hold up to in order to do some of the things that we want it to. Overall, there are a lot of things that go into it. But one of the things I do want to see, and I alluded to this earlier when I talked about the prevent offense, is when you get a big lead, I feel like it's okay to then play the same way you played to get that lead, instead of going, hey, we got a lead now we got to shut it down. And that is one of the tendencies that is absolutely 1000% there, and it's a Kevin Stefanski thing, and it's coaching staff wide. Like the entire staff does it. This is a philosophy. They get a lead and they kind of just hold on to dear life. Even when they put up 40 points, any game where they've kind of blown a team out in the first half, you notice that they only win by like 7 or 8 because they hang on to dear life because of how they coach. And I hope they realize that they don't have to be as extreme as they are right now. I think there is room for risk-taking and chance-taking once you're up, and you don't have to completely become a shell of what you were to get that lead in order to maintain that lead. I think there's room for them to be a little bit more aggressive that they can take advantage of, because again, when you get a 20-point lead on the team, you want to be able to do what brought you to the dance. Last year, they were fortunate enough to hang on in a lot of these situations. This year, it don't look like it's going to happen that same way. Next question comes from William Zinn, who says, after yesterday's game, I think the question is simple. Are they growing as a team and organization, or have they stalled? Is this the same team as last year with different players and injuries? All right, guys, we got to let the course of the season play out before we're asking like huge questions about the organization and the team. Organizational, I mean, the roster's better. Like the young players are very good on this team. So they've definitely grown in that way. Every season has its ups and downs, its highs and lows. No team, this is not college football where you come out the gate and you win every game. Like every team has their ups and downs. Look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year. I remember at this point last year, people were laughing at Tom Brady for going into that offense when he's old and thinking that he's going to win a Super Bowl with that pasted together roster. And then all of a sudden February comes and who's Super Bowl champion? You know what I mean? At this point last year, people were talking about Case Keenum, right? For the Cleveland Browns. Not like a lot of people, but some people were talking about Case Keenum, and then now look where we're at. You know what I mean? Every season has its flow. It's impossible to make a big determination on the coaching staff, the team, or the organization at this point because we simply don't have enough information. And I want to remind you guys, this is not unheard of where the Cleveland Browns are. In my prediction video, if you want to go back and check out that prediction video, go back and watch it. The record is exactly what I thought it would be at this time. So let's strap in. It's going to be a ride. There are going to be some ups. There are going to be some downs. And we're not really even close to halfway. So let's strap in. The next question comes from Mike Hall, who says, why are the refs not held accountable for bad calls? Should they be fined? I'm not a fan of fining referees. One, it's something you do to players, and I'm not necessarily a fan of fining players for stuff that happens on the football field, but more so, how much are you going to fine a referee? Like, they don't make that much money comparatively to everybody else on the football field. And what are you going to fine a referee for? For missing a call? You know what I mean? Like, I know we're harsh on referees, but it is a very difficult job. Anybody who is at anywhere close to a NFL football field knows that game moves like this. Like, missed calls happen. I'm not upset that referees miss calls on the field. I'm upset that the NFL as a league, not the referees as an entity, the NFL as a league hasn't done enough to support the referees to make sure that they can get their job done correctly. Like, that's what I'm upset about. Why aren't there better processes in place? Why aren't there more video screens available to them? Why aren't there more checks for these referees so they can get this information that we can get immediately on the television broadcast? Why is that not readily available to the referees? And why is it not available in a way that doesn't require a team forcing the referees to do it? Referees want to get the call right too. And I don't think the league does enough. The NFL does enough to support them. So if you're asking me if I think the NFL should fine these referees for not doing a good job when they don't give these referees enough support to do the good job that we want them to do, that's ridiculous. The NFL should take initiative, not fining these referees. What's that going to do at the end of the day if you suspend a referee? It's not going to help the game get better or the calls get better. The NFL needs to take initiative and really make it hard to miss a call. Institute a sky judge, have somebody in the booth, have video available for review when they're conferencing on these calls. They don't, and they're debating whether they should pick these flags up or not. Right now, the referees are forced to call things with their eyes when they don't have to, but they do because that's how the NFL makes them do their job. So no, the NFL should in no way be fining these referees when they're not helping them do their job any better. The NFL should help them do their job better. That's the end of it. I get that a lot of this gets thrown at the individual refs because they're the people you see on game day. But if you want referee calls to get better, if you want things like this to change, pointing the finger or wanting a referee to get fined isn't going to solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is putting pressure on the NFL to do something to help the referees that isn't a challenge flag for a freaking missed call. That is something more along the lines of what every other football league has, which is a sky judge. That's what the NFL needs to do, not the referees. The NFL needs to do that because it's their league, their product, and that's what they need to do to fix it. So that's my thoughts on that thing. I think the NFL's efforts to fix things like this have been horrendous. So that's what I think about that. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Again, guys, thank you for asking these questions. Have a great day. Have a good night.